CDJR, you're screwed. Your customers are screwed. You might not be in business a few years from now. I'm sorry, Zach. I got hyperbolic like you, but I think I'm speaking the truth.
All right, here's the deal, gang. We are going to be talking about Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Average transaction prices, let's start there. Here is your market case for why those four brands may not be in business just a few years from now. Pops, I'm going to put you on the spot. What was the average transaction price at Ram last quarter? What do you think?
Ram, but it's got to be in the mid 60s, $66,000.
North of $65,000. Pops, what do you think the average transaction price over at Jeep was last quarter?
55 grand.
The average transaction price at Jeep, north of $55,000. All right, Pops, let me give you an easy one. Dodge. What do you think the average transaction price for a Dodge vehicle was last quarter?
54,000.
A little bit below 54,000, but you're not too far off. Even Chrysler and Alfa Romeo have seen their average transaction prices skyrocket over the past few years. The reason CDJR customers and dealers are potentially screw dead is because as average transaction prices have gone up, the way that customers have been able to afford buying those vehicles, extended loan terms, higher loan to value ratios, and the Fed printing money, well, all of that has started to stop. And last time I checked,
yes,
the credit profile, the type of person that buys a CDJR vehicle is not prime or super prime. It's typically lower on the credit sphere or credit spectrum. And those people, you've got new news on this, they're having more and more difficulty actually getting approved for an auto loan.
Well, banks are tightening up their lending criteria. Many of the banks are raising the minimum credit scores for different tiers. Some banks used to say, well, you're prime and above if you're 650 or higher. Okay, or you're near prime or above, 650 or higher. Well, now a lot of those banks are saying 680 and higher or 690 and higher. Well, every time you raise those credit criteria like that, you're cutting off a whole bunch of people that will no longer be able to qualify for the better interest rates. And as we know, right now, average new car interest rates are above 9%. Well, if you don't qualify for near prime or super prime, you're going to be looking at average new car rates that could be 11 or 12%, which means that vehicle wasn't affordable to begin with, but it's even less affordable now.
And we're already seeing this manifest itself, Dad. Jeep sales year over year down nearly 10%. What more clear picture do you need that sales are going down because customers can't afford these things? And again, like I said a moment ago, the way they were able to quote unquote afford them a few months ago, half a year ago, loan to value ratios were absurd. And the extended term, you could get approved for an 84 or 96 even month car loan, and that made it quote unquote affordable on a monthly basis for consumers. That is not happening right now. A reversion to the mean is occurring. At the same time, the average transaction prices are still through the roof. We see this as well manifesting itself not only in a lack of sales, but an increase in inventory. We track this constantly.
Yes.
CDJR has the most inventory in the country of any of the major OEMs and even leading the other domestics. And it is an exact function of what you just described. People can't get approved, nor should they want to even put themselves in that situation.
And typically people that fall a little lower in the credit score spectrum, they just feel thankful when they do get approved. And which is why they've tended to go towards brands like Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram. But Dodge sales are down for the year. Jeep sales are down for the year. Ram sales are down for the year. Now, you can go look at every other major manufacturer. Sales are up. Okay, now maybe in the case of Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, they're not selling as many fleet vehicles, but I would find that hard to believe. Fleets will buy, especially rental fleets, they'll buy Dodges, they'll buy Rams, they'll buy Jeeps. So It's the regular customers that they're losing. And part of the reason that they're losing them is because the banks are making it harder and harder for their customers to qualify for those car loans. That's why I think Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Chrysler dealers, they're in trouble. They might not realize it at the moment, but until credit loosens up again and interest rates come down, they're going to be more adversely affected by this situation than any other brand out there.
Quick editor's note, Dodge sales are actually up about 8.5% year over year, but for the third quarter, they were down more than 22% year over year. So maybe starting to trend in the downward direction. All the other brands you mentioned, their sales are down. And I agree with you, Dad. Those four, and I'm going to even extend that to the other domestics, so GM and Ford, they typically rely on a customer that is lower on the credit spectrum.
Yes.
They are going to be materially impacted for years. And you can also throw in there the fact that their vehicle prices are probably not going to go down anytime soon. Look at the current ongoing UAW strike. That is only going to increase transaction prices more and more. Whereas brands like Subaru, Toyota, those that skew prime, super prime, they are going to flourish, absolutely flourish in this market. I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Nissan also struggles, because again, they skew more on the less than prime on the credit spectrum. This is the affordability crisis and the subsequent credit crunch are going to put a lot of pain on a lot of brands, CDJR being primary number one, and their sales are already reflecting it. And I don't even think it's the worst of the worst, Dad. The worst of the worst is a year from now for them, 2 years from now, when things aren't rebounding, but they've still produced so many vehicles. Okay, so let's talk about that then briefly. How are they going to react? They're going to put money on the hood of each of these cars. They're going to add incentives. That's what they're already doing. That's what they're known for. That'll be the only way that they'll have a path to digging themselves out of this hole, right?
And the other thing that in my opinion spells doom for them is the fact that the Fed came out and said, hey, there could be one more rate increase this year. And B, we don't anticipate starting to lower rates again until a year from now. So interest rates will go up even further, making it harder and harder for their customers to be able to afford these vehicles. Banks tightening their lending criteria. The next 12 to 18 months could be extremely critical for some of these brands that we're speaking of here.
Yeah, the landscape, the marketplace, it's changing rapidly. And yeah, CDJR, we think you're in the crossfire, and hell, your stats, they speak for themselves right now.
They do, unfortunately.